So when you guys came back and asked us to do an MOU, which we did for referendum dollars, the capital discussion wasn't on the memo or on the memorandum of understanding, because in 1718, the decision of how much to pay of your millage for our charter schools was taken out of your hands and put into law. So there isn't any vehicle technically for us to increase the funding to Sky Inglewood to the full value. We could, obviously, absolutely, but that calculation on that spreadsheet was a continuation of $16-17.
Got it.
Also, when you're looking at the 3-year average, Sky Inglewood was not eligible for PICO in 16-17, so there were only 2 years of PICO eligibility. So again, there's that difference. I know that Shirley had mentioned there was a big disparity between SSIS and Sky Inglewood. So part of it is that Sky Inglewood only received 2 years of PICO, and the millage share estimate was based on 30% of only Sarasota County students, based on the percentage from 16-17. And PICO dollars are distributed to charter schools based upon their student population. So if you have SSIS is a Title I school, which means more than 75% of their students are on free and reduced lunch. They get a bonus funding for PICO of an additional 25% per student. So again, that will make SSIS's per student amount seem much greater when you're combining the apple called PICO and the orange called millage to get to the total. So again, that's kind of why those numbers seem so disproportionate.
So for clarity, though, I don't want to use the other options because I don't want to add confusion, but kind of going back to the 16-17 benchmark, but PICO is pass through at this point.
Absolutely.
So that's what I wanted to clarify. So there isn't a zero. I mean, so if I look at the current adopted preliminary budget we approved, that gave them, I see 128,000. I don't know if you have it in front of you, but 128,897. That doesn't change no matter what option
based on FTE times $566.
I think that's just important. One, for me to ensure, but two is that the Sky family understand that that's happening no matter what. Is that a fair statement? Okay, all right. And then,
but yes.
Well, yeah, I know. Right. But our actions would not
it would
have
not
any implications on the PICO pass-through
from Department of Ed.
So, and that's okay. And then the other part was just confirming that we're getting that $2 million. I want to make sure that that's, because I know Kathy in the past has even said we had 25 allocated to the safety initiative, and she said it looked trending to 26. And now we are to 21. So I need that for me overseeing, especially as we think about the conversation we just had prior to that, planning for, our high schools and all the other capital potential projects we have. So I just need to make sure that that money that they're projecting that we're coming in significant, from 25 to 26 now to 21, that gives us a $2 million dollar amount to supplement this potentially new proposal.
Yes, and so we pushed really hard on them, and we made a $25 million allocation. There were cost estimates as we started doing projects that came in north of the 25, at which point we pushed back and said, get it within the scope of the 25. And so when they came in at 21, we were rather surprised, and they said, well, you said push it down. There are some things that they cut that they feel like need to be added back. So that's why there's essentially $4 million left in that safety security pool, that if you took out $2 million, you left $2 million for them to go back and fill some. We basically are splitting what's left.
So it wasn't extra money. It's not extra money. It's money that was not used for safety and security.
In the first round of contract. Listen, if you went to the safety and security office and said, can you spend $4 million? They would not waste the money. There are viable projects that could be done.
No, that's a fair statement, and that's important that's where it's incumbent upon us to make that decision on priority, how to balance that. And Shirley made a good point about our charter schools are in a place where they have 15% of the safe schools allocation, but that's just like us, cutting short of what the expectation is. So being mindful of that component and balancing our projects with that. I can't remember who had I feel like it was Eric and then Shirley, but okay, Shirley. Eric, I'm sorry.
Do we need to do a motion if we wanted to have Sky share capital dollars like they do the referendum?
I think if you just included it if you make a motion during your meeting, I guess this
Correct.
evening, to provide charter schools with capital funding, I just include that Englewood would be included at 100% of their, and for all charter schools, $200 per unweighted FTE.
But will that motion
students?
be that way going forward, or that would only be for that particular
No.
year?
That would just,
be going
you're talking about an annual allocation, and so you would need to say either the 200 or the 250, just say, the motion, and if you'd like, we can do a sample motion, but basically saying it's an allocation per unweighted FTE of students in enrollment during the 18-19 year, regardless of what county they reside in, and that would cover you wouldn't have to think.
But if I wanted to do one that, going forward, like the referendum, it'd have to be a separate motion.
Aren't you setting
Correct.
precedent?
All right.
Wait, aren't you setting precedent?
This is a revolving door, and we don't know what the legislature is going to do this year. This is a reset year, but we are anticipating capital changes.
Wanted to know what had to be done.
I had my hand up, and I'm going to assume she acknowledged this.
I will acknowledge you now.
That's
I'm
right, you're
in charge right now.
Okay. We've been looking at a 3-year average, but if we looked at a 5-year average, that amount comes to $817 for a 5-year average. And if we go back to my $250 proposal, it comes out to, if you take $250 onto $566, you get $816. It brings them up to the 5-year average. I don't want to get stuck in the weeds with Sky Academy, Sarasota, Charlotte things. This year, I think at another time, we can take and look at that along with those other proposals that I was talking about. Let's workshop it again, but I don't want to get stuck in the weeds. I would just say $250 across the board per student for all the schools, and just be done with it. And I think that will that'll bring them up to the 5-year average, not that shorter window of the 3-year average. Because if you take a 5-year average, it's 817. You add 250 onto 566, you get 816. It's clean, it's easy, I understand it, and shut the door and go forward. That's what I would like to propose.
So we'd make a simple motion that would say that we would award a $250 per student FTE this year to all students in all charter schools in the county. I mean, it's pretty simple.
This year.
This year.
This year only,
Because
yes.
next year, things are going to change. We've already been told this will be a new benchmarking year, so forth and so on. We don't know about PICO. I've told you all before that I have heard that PICO may go away, may be used for higher ed. There's all kinds of talk about what will happen with capital dollars, so I think that this would be something that we would be able to do this year that would help everybody out, and then reset next year and make some other decisions based on some of the kinds of questions that you mentioned.
Bridget, while you were gone, I pointed out that the 5-year average is $816, and if we were to add the 250 onto the 566, we get to, well, the 5-year average is 817. If we add the 250 onto the 566, which isn't on the page, but we're told that's what the number should be, that brings us to 816. So if we added 250, it would bring us up to the 5-year average. And we talked about not messing with this school population coming from what county, would just flat across the board, and later after the session is over, addressing it going forward.
So adding it just per unweighted FTE is what you're saying, per student, and at
That's how
250?
PICO's calculated, yeah.
Okay. And that comes out to 1.6 on the estimate?
That's the 1.6 million, yes.
I think next year's going to be pretty.
Well,
Cut the budget.
so that's my,
We don't know if the budget's going to be cut. Tallahassee might take care of them, but it still goes back to that 30% we used to give them.
I have one of my partners in my office, she always says, never give something that you think that you're going to have to take away. And we give them this a higher amount. When next year comes and we can't afford to give them the 250 plus something, we're going to be getting mass emails about you're cutting the funding.
So I don't. No, and I think that's
It's again going back to school. It's a problem. You can see that it's going to happen next year.
Well, here's where I think is important, and this for me, as I reflect on the whole thing, is I believe if you look at the timeline and when we typically share the information, which was around March when this was first discussed as a board, all we were talking about was safety and security. I mean, that is what was on everyone's radar. And so in the event that was lost on the PICO sharing versus the millage, it is. So we have to look forward. I mean, there's no changing what occurred in the past. It's trying to fix this and not leave anyone hanging, because it does impact our students, whatever school they go to. But the other part that I think is really important, and so I think pointing fingers of communication or anything like that doesn't help us at all, because I think there's just a reality of that's what was taking place. But we are at a point where they've already started school, and I think this has been discussed or kicked down the can, and for a variety of reasons. So trying to make that a decision now. But my concern is, what do we do next year? Because I think 17, 18 is what caused a real ruckus, because the forecast planning, and while for Sarasota it made it kind of a wild year, it did for other districts kind of made them give them more. So you can look at it in a small silo, but it is not, you can't do that if you want to be fair and work collaboratively. And I share that because I like hearing from everyone, and I want to hear their voices, but it was somewhat disheartening to hear that there was whatever was being shared was not in a fully transparent or in detail. And it's a really complicated issue, so I don't think it's something you can quickly, analyze and fully understand it. But I want it to be clear, and that's what I said after our meeting, is I think this board has a consistent history of being very supportive of our charter schools and sharing where we can, but also looking at the whole picture, every student, not just charter schools, not just district managed, but the whole thing. So where Eric's point is not lost on me is preparing for next year. You can't keep doing that. And so I don't know from a collaboration standpoint, and I know Sarasota is far beyond other districts when it comes to collaboration, but I really, from the bottom, I don't know how else to share that. I hope that is well understood, that we are, if you heard the capital improvement plan discussion prior to this, we have some very serious decisions to make, and we always will, as will they, but we can't just keep pulling. I don't want the same thing to happen next year where it just looks like we're not funding certain things. It's not that. I just think that's important to share those words, Shirley.
And I think the charter schools heard it loud and clear that you can't count on funding from one year to the next. We'll have to take this under consideration, what happens next year. But I think this was a unique year in that they didn't get a heads up. We hadn't thought about it earlier, and we apologize for that. But we've got to work more closely together throughout the legislative session so you understand what's coming. And I'm a little bit distracted right now
Because you got something
because one of our board members seems to be texting or whatever. And I know from previous times that texting or whatever.
Okay, please.
No, it's not. I have a concern because I know that some things I say and do during a board meeting or send emails out, they get sent to somebody else.
Shirley, I was just trying to be polite and walking away from the table, so not to do it from the table, and just checking my email to see if there's anything for work. I was trying to be respectful for the process.
Well, I just saw fingers going and whatnot, but anything that happens during a board meeting would be subject to public records. And
I was trying to be respectful for the process and walking away from the thing. If you have an idea how I can do that better, I'm all ears.
I have an idea how you could do that better. Stay at the table and leave the phone to the side, because it's not, I don't think I'm out of bounds for having a concern about that, because it's previous behavior. I'm sorry. It was previous behavior. And I know just the last 2 weeks, I sent an email out and it was turned around to somebody else immediately.
Shirley, I got up from the table so as not to be disruptive. I check in my email from work. I'm a small business owner. I was trying to be respectful for the organization and the group. I know you guys have said you don't want it to be done at the table, so I'm just trying to be respectful to the board and removing myself.
Respectful would stay here.
Okay, I'm sorry. I feel like and again, from a timing standpoint, I think you made your point, and okay, can we move forward, please? No, I think, I don't, did you finish what your statement was?
I have, and hopefully my comments won't be on somebody's Facebook and a.
Okay, so Dr. Bowden, or Todd.
You know, I just want to speak one more time to the volatility of the capital funds that flow to the charter schools. And I've said to their principals and I've said to their finance officers is I don't know how you build budgets. You know, we're trying to project a 5-year capital plan. And, you know, when you look at the graph of kind of where they're at in capital dollars. But I do want to point out that our 5-year capital plan includes significant allocations in years 2, 3, 4, and 5. That reflects also the uncertainty on our side is the way we read the legislation. And all I can tell you is certain is that legislation will change, is that we know that it will bankrupt other districts in the state, that they can't pay according to the current law. But, you know, we're talking about this year an allocation of $1.6 million. And I just want to point you back to the 5-year capital plan that will be in front of you this evening. We have allocations of $10.9 million, 12.1, 14.1, and 15.6. And so
Page 32.
But at the same time, I don't want finance officers at charter schools to divide those numbers by 6,400 and build budgets around that. Is because of the volatility, I don't think it's a stretch to say from a planning perspective, capital threshold will probably be around that 775, 800. You may get amounts above it like you did last year, but treat anything above that 775, 800 as a one-time windfall and don't plan on it in future years. But if I were a finance officer at a charter school, I would think on an annual basis you're going to end up around that 775, 800. You may get more, but I don't want someone saying, wait, you have $10.9 million in your budget next year. If I divide that by 6,400 students, that's 1,500 apiece. Don't build your budgets for next year around that number. But the real point that I want to make to this board is the volatility in money that flows to charter schools for capital also affects us. And so we have set aside significant dollars in our 5-year capital plan because we just don't know not only what the board will decide, but what the state will obligate us to.
Very good point. And I also, for a point of clarification, last year when we approved a CIP, it was $9.6 million of what we estimated. And then legislation changed. There was the correction. So for perspective, that's a good point.
And the other thing that really disturbs me is that I know that a lot of the charter schools use this for recurring expenses because I heard them coming up when they came up and talked about hiring another teacher, and you can't base your budget on that because we don't know what's going to happen next year, and yet they're doing hiring of staff based on the capital. And that's why I want us to be very clear that this doesn't mean this will happen next year. Because they are hiring staff with that capital funding. We're not. We don't hire staff.
I know, Mitzi or Todd, I know that this was addressed last time because there was clarification that needed.
And it could, we've held webinars with the finance officers at the charter schools to clarify the appropriate uses of capital funding, how they need to keep those dollars separate and segregated. In the past, I guess it wasn't really as much of an issue. Now that but for 17-18, they received so much money, and then the state even provided guidance that we've sent down to the charter schools, and then Krista and Valerie both held a webinar for those particular individuals to let them know what they can and cannot spend those dollars on. Many of them use them for debt payments or for lease payments for their facilities. That's what the largest portion of the dollars go for, computer equipment and so on and so forth. I think when they get up and they're speaking to you, I mean, it was very concerning to me too, when they started talking about all of these instructional people, and I'm like, I can't use that money for that. I believe it's because their concern is what they're using their operating dollars for that they have to then spend on their capital needs would be lost, and that would be staff from their operating they would lose, basically, is what I would believe is what they meant when they got up there to speak.
Is that what you're going to?
Well, and just to remind you that the first 3 years that you look here, 14, 15, 15, 16, and 16, 17, those allocations were really based on our history as a school district. Is, people referred to the 30% rule. Well, the 30% rule is what we call the capital transfer, is we were taking about 30% of our capital dollars and transferring into operating for allowable expenditures, custodial salaries, those, she's going to stop me on some of the details, but
Yeah, you're gonna
try to make their operating dollars very similar to ours.
Right, it's for maintenance, equipment, property insurance,
Certain
those type of
allowable.
things that you normally pay for out of your operating fund, but are allowable uses of the capital outlay millage.
Can I add one thing for clarification? Because I think one of the main reasons I wanted to bring this back was for purposes of clarification, not just for the board, but for the public. And so, Mitzi, I know you had shared I actually ended up sharing it a lot to try, because it was a very helpful outline of the restricted capital dollars that we receive as a district that cannot be shared. And so when you look at it, the pool of capital dollars that we have and try to aggregate or make a calculation on the 15% of student population based on that, that is not a fair, accurate example. We have some, I know you use the sales tax, penny sales tax, and then the impact fees. Those are two. And there's other elements, and I think, I don't know, I think Mr. Robinson mentioned something about the asset component
I'm
of
just
it.
confused because Ms. Brown just got up and left the table.
Stop. Please, we're doing so well. Come on, let's keep
some garbage out.
I thought you were texting, sorry.
Thank you. Can we please stop both, please? Please.
Children.
So,
I just thought Ms. Brown was texting.
thank you. I think we're good on that. But now I lost my train of thought. Ugh. But that we also have to, as you saw in the meeting before this, for the CIP, and plan for large expenditures for, projecting for building and such. And so while we continue to support, because they're all our students, charter school students, the per student allocation or calculation concerns me. I think it skews it in a significant way. When you look at, I think there was a spreadsheet that had something, a differential of $525 versus $3,130 per student. I caution anyone who looks at that to really understand that that is just not a fair assessment because of the assets that are held with the district, and not necessarily the charter schools. It works differently. So
I agree with you totally. And in addition to that, there are dollars that we are sharing with our charter schools that they don't visibly see. For example, our charter schools, many of them, some of them have their own buses, but many of them contract with us for their transportation services. Those buses are purchased with our capital funds, but we use them to transport their students. In the rates we charge them, there is no component for replacement of the bus. There's a maintenance component for maintaining the bus, gas, and the driver's time, but there is no actual component for the bus replacement. For many of our charter schools, we contract for food and nutrition services. Again, the capital dollars that outfit our kitchens with the freezers and the stoves and the hot plates and all of that stuff, we use capital dollars to cover those costs and provide the meals to those students. We are required by law to house and open our schools up as shelters during an emergency. So we have to build our facilities to a certain code and level that are required in order to be able to provide that. We use capital dollars for that. So there are a lot of capital funds that we use that hopefully do benefit those students and families as well, that are not implicitly transferred to the charter school. So I just kind of wanted to make that point.
No, and I think
also.
that's a good point. I just want to make sure there's clarity, because I don't want it to be perceived that we're turning our backs on students. They're students. And so however we can find an equitable way and solution. And I think, so the only question I have is the millage compared to PICO, because we are a property-rich community.
Absolutely.
And millage is a significant amount more than necessarily PICO, and PICO changes every year based on what the distribution is. As we forecast or prepare for next year, and again, it's an unknown because we don't know what the legislature is going to do. We just don't know. But I think that may have taken a bigger hit when you look at it, because we're not giving any percentage of millage from the 1.5, because that's a huge, I believe the district takes in more money from that than the PICO. I think I can understand why there's concern that we haven't been utilizing that. So if I understand correctly, as a compromise solution for this current year would be adding $250 per student unweighted FTE. And we have the money to do that, not without dipping into reserves.
That is correct.
Okay. And then, however we can make this loud and clear that next year it is an unknown, and so we will work as closely as possible with our charter schools. But again, 18, 7, I can't read that. 17, 18. Take that out of everyone's thought. I mean, I don't know that there will ever be a year like that again. Certainly, Sarasota was different than other counties, but I just think that's really important. So I'm done. Thank you. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. Unless there are any other comments, questions? We're 5 minutes. We're almost back on track.
How about that?
So, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Great moral support. Mitzi, thank y'all.
All right, that's yours. You can have
Thank
that.
you, sir.
I have no problem you getting up.
I don't want to hear. Can we just leave the getting up? Yeah, let's. You know what?
Just check their-
Let's take a 5-minute recess so everyone can use the restroom or check their emails or whatever. So 5 minutes. We will return. That's at 10:25. Good idea, Todd.
Good. Just when they were talking about Tina, I'm like,
I already used
I'm going to
the
have to
restroom,
walk
so
that woman
it's
back
I
off
did.
the ledge.
Me too. I didn't know we were going to have a break. We don't only have breaks. That's what I got.
And then last night, I left at 7:30 and I walked out and because it was like deathly quiet. And so I assumed I was the last one there because I usually am. So I set the alarm and walked out. Fortunately for me, the custodian went back in for some reason. I don't know, because he walked in on me in the bathroom as I was like, whoa. And then I get outside and I see Krista's car. So I'm like, holy cow. And I'm like calling Krista. I'm like, hello? Did you out to dinner with Naz? Are you at the store? What's going on? No, you locked me in.
I locked you in.
No, I did not lock you in. She goes, well, thanks for checking on me. And I just told the custodian that she locked me in and I'm not allowed to leave until all my work is done. I'm like, oh, no.
Is it back there?
I think so, yes. I locked Krista in, set the alarm and everything on her last night when I left at 7:30 thinking I was totally by myself. Because she was very, very quiet back there. So I saw her car, I called. I'm like, are you okay? Did you set the alarm off?
I was trying to teach Mike how to use his iPhone last night. Oh my God. It's like trying to teach a child.
I didn't think so, but they'll be on the top 25. I'll guarantee you that. And what is the
his fate tomorrow? Well, he's a piece of crap as far as I'm concerned. This was going on when he was at the University of Florida, and none of the news media in Ocala, Florida, mentioned it or did a report on it.
Going to give a 1-minute warning until we resume.
I do. He's the one that broke it, and thank God he did break it because nobody else seemed to. Well, that's the point. And Joe, Urban is acting just like Joe Pa did at Penn State. If you know anything about the Penn State story, I mean, he just was like oblivious. Yeah, pretty sad for Urban Meyer, but not surprising.
Got more spreadsheets than I know what to do with here. Yes, I do too. I have to see the, I like the calculation. I love Excel. Okay, so if every board member can take their seats, we're going to get started. Thank you, Ms. Goodwin, for being on time.
I have a bad back, so that's why I walk around a little bit. I can't sit.
And we are reconvening our monthly workshop and moving to extended day program access for employee dependents. Welcome, Chris Renoff, and welcome back, Mitzi. How are you today?
Excellent.
Good.
So last January, when we had the conversation regarding extending child care to our employees for free, it was, based upon available capacities, but you had asked us to come back to let us know what kind of impact has this had on our schools. So this is pretty much just kind of a snapshot. Each of the schools provided to me the number of employees, if they provided it, the number of employees who participated, the number of students. We were very clear that it should be based upon your available capacity.
Right.
You shouldn't be hiring extra people to provide your child care programs. I don't know that that is the case or not the case, but so this is just kind of an overview of all of the elementary schools in Pineview. Those who have the YMCA are shown on here. There is a contract that's coming. Is it on tonight's agenda? Today's agenda?
It may be on this evening's agenda.
For the YMCA to extend free childcare to employees at those locations. So they kind of took our cue based off of what we were doing. And
Why do you use two decimal numbers for number of employees and students? I mean, aren't they always going to be whole numbers?
I think it's just the
I
calculation.
mean, I'm just kind of kidding.
okay.
Never know. Household, when we do capacity, it's a,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
So, so then the revenue loss is just a straight calculation. Each school kept attendance records because in some cases you'll see large number of employees, but their child may have only gone for one day after school because they had a meeting, or it's not an everyday occurrence. So it was incidental, occasional childcare as well as daily childcare that's included. So it's the calculation for the revenue loss is based off of the approved childcare rates times the total number of students and days that they attended. And then some actually provided me with the cost of the snacks. So we just wanted to, as we promised you, bring back this information to you. We think the program's been pretty successful. The employees appreciate having it. But I think Chris may have a few words regarding the impacts to the schools themselves.
No, and I think just in talking with the principals, I mean, hands down, all of them appreciate the benefit that this has for staff. There's no question. Kudos to those schools that do have the YMCA that, again, are looking to offer that same benefit. So I think it really, is very productive on, for all of our employees. The one thing that I just want to say, I think the principals, as I talk to them, they feel it's manageable with the guidelines that are in place. And so kudos to Mitzi's department for helping craft those guidelines with regards to capacity, because, that's where it starts to get challenging. So that, because they incur additional costs if they needed to, add staff, which, again, it was very clear that they do not have to do that. So, again, they've started waiting lists, but again, those guidelines, those clarity of expectations, I think really helped everybody. But the one piece that I do hear from principals, especially at the elementary level, that discretionary, those discretionary dollars, I mean, it's few and far between at elementary school.
Right.
So the percentage of dollars that they do get from the revenue of this type of program really goes a long, long way. It supports curriculum resources, technology, believe it or not, substitutes, overtime for folks. I mean, they use it in such a variety of ways. So the small percentage that they do recoup back at the schools, it really, really does go a long way.
So for clarification, I have two questions on the revenue loss. First, thank you. And thank you. I know Eric brought this up, and I agree. I think as we tackle how to retain and attract great educators and teachers and staff, this is a huge benefit. That's not just direct pay. It's I think as a mom with two little kids and know how challenging the struggle is real. So however we can help, I would appreciate that. My question was, and I'm glad, because as we talked about this, there is regulations you have to have. There's a ratio aspect when we're talking about certain students and children, and so my question was, there are off scenarios where there may be a meeting, but right. So and there's the perceived revenue loss. Is it? Do all the staff, are they fully aware that this exists, or was it only that? I just am curious as we move forward if the demand will be higher. I know we're not looking at hiring more just to staff this function, but was it like a known benefit?
I think it was pretty well distributed. It was sent to all users via email.
Right.
There were notices that were placed on bulletin boards for those who don't have email.
Okay.
We had webinars with the principals who then conveyed it to their staff, and their child care managers were present. So the child care managers were well aware of it. We had a form created for employees to complete that child care managers have to give to them. Because they do charge them a registration fee, but then after that they don't pay anything. It's just to handle the paperwork.
Okay, I have a lot of questions, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shirley.
And again, the differences in the revenue, I mean, is it because they're part-time? Because I see for 30 students at Ashton, it was $19,000. For 32 students at Lamarck, it was $11,000. And for 31 students at Philippi Shores, it was, $6,500. That was because it was...
Well, there's two different rates for students, those who are on free and reduced lunch and those who are not. And then if you don't attend every day, you're charged based upon data.
Okay, so the difference would be for free.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
That's
Many different, the numbers are very varying, and, but they were based upon those individual attendance rates times $8, $7 for a second student. So again, if you have a second child, the rate is lower. If you have a child who's on free and reduced lunch, the rate is half. And so there's many different rates, variables that come into play.
And there's no waiting. So if you used it just for a faculty meeting once a month and your child went 5 times, they show up the same way on this spreadsheet if you went 80 days.
Correct.
Eric.
I just want to say thank you to Mitzi and to Chris and to Todd. I know $250,000 is a lot of money, but if you look at just overall benefits and how much money we pay in salaries, and I agree with Ms. Ziegler. I got last year of elementary school. Maddie's in 5th grade, so it's a little weird, but I still consider her a little girl.
She is.
Yeah, she is. She's the ball girl at Venice High. First volleyball games tonight, and Maddie will be the ball girl, so go out there. But I think that $250,000 is money well spent for recruitment and retention of the employees, to let the employees know that not only are you important to us, but your family's important to us, and we recognize the challenges that you have of being a parent. And I don't think that type of benefit stops at the parents. I think other employees see that the organization cares about them as a family, and that we're like an extended family. And so I think that those kind of relationships with your employees only strengthens the recruitment and retention, and which is a big problem and issue, which costs us in the long run a heck of a lot more than $250,000. But again, this shouldn't just be the stop. I mean, there were so many things. I look forward to having a workshop on recruitment and retention teachers, because I think it's a massive issue that permutates into all levels of the district. And so I just want to again applaud. It's not just you three involved, but you just happen to be here. If you could take it back to your staff about how much it's appreciated. I know it puts pressure onto the principals in that, but I also think that creating that sense of community and people feeling that they're respected and people understand their issues, because childcare is a big issue. So I just want to tell you thank you.
Thank you. Jane, did you have I'm sorry.
Yes, I was just curious about the 21st Century Grant. At one time, we had that grant at Wilkinson as well. Why do we not now have that?
I just know that that had come and gone in years.
Right.
I mean, because we actually had it at a number of our Title I schools. And I think with restriction, that I don't know if from a finance perspective,
I thought, I was just curious.
It had expired, and I know that the amount of funds that was allocated had dramatically decreased.
I'm seeing the funding slowed everywhere.
Well, but that's a great point so I have two questions, because I agree. I want to find a way to do this, but always we have to, where do we get that money from? And something you said at the beginning is the impact it has on the principals and the discretionary funding. And so while it could supplement for substitutes, and you consider, maybe this will, I don't know. There's so many scenarios that we could, that we could guess, but if that hurts them, how could we help from more? And I'm not a big centralized, as you guys know, I don't love the idea of centralizing certain things, but I also believe that, and I don't think there's any possible way we could do that, but to minimize the impact to our schools for other areas, because it would have an impact to other areas. Is there any ideas of how we could supply this, but also still give them, not hurt their discretionary funding sources in a way?
So that $250,000 figure is lost revenue that may or may not have accrued back to the school to begin with. So there are a number of employees who, if there wasn't free aftercare, their kids would have just stayed in their classrooms and done homework in the corner. But on the opposite side of it, there are a number of employees whose kids were going to before care and after care, and they were paying out of pocket. And when the email went out, they were very excited, because they said, "You mean I don't have to pay anymore?" So that was an immediate hit to the schools of saying, "So I don't have to pay for February, March, April, and May." And so that $253,000 figure is not all dollars that, if this program went away, that the schools would realize, is that because of that utilization. So I just want to caution you on that figure. But there were some real financial impacts. There were some principals who were very good at defining capacity and said, I can take 6 people in, but the 7th, I don't have room for you. There's others that just said, we're just going to figure out a way. And I do believe they incurred some costs, even though our direction to them was not to incur any additional costs. There were some principals who said, I have a hard time defining capacity because there's not a class size limit for extended day. And they just said, come on, we'll figure it out.
I mean, okay. Okay. Did anyone questions? So where do we get the money from? I guess is my question, if we want to go forward with this.
Well, at this point, our recommendation is that we continue forward under the regular parameters, which is we've told the principals and after-school managers that they do it on a space available basis. Under those parameters, they've been able to accommodate these kids. When principals have called and said, there is a real cost to this, our answer to them is you have the right to say no. So you may see in some issues where the principals are now saying, last year I took in 30 kids, but it was costing me, and now I've got to limit it to 10 or 12. But I think the program is working. I go back to Mitzi's original comments, is that under the current parameter, I think we have tapped into excess capacity, have been able to provide a benefit to our employees without unduly creating a hardship and without tapping into district funds. So I think there's a real sweet spot here that we've been able to serve our employees and to do it with a minimal financial impact to the schools. I think we just need to continually kind of reinforce to the principals it's on a space available basis.
And from a grant standpoint, and I know we have some very creative teachers and administrators on finding all sorts of funding sources out there, is that, I mean, and Jane talked about the 21st Century Grant. Is there any, because I fear I don't want a principal have to be in that position where they say, sorry, we can't do this. I foresee that being a challenge. So how can we provide support? I believe this is an initiative I think is valuable overall to the culture of this our organization, but I also want to avoid putting principals in a tougher spot. How do we help?
Right now, as Dr. Bowden has said, I think we just need to make sure, continue as we have been, but keep those lines of communication clearly open to our principals. They know that they can contact myself, anybody in finance, if they're experiencing any kind of issue with running the program, whether it's a capacity issue or needing to add additional staff because for whatever reason the demand is just higher or whatever, we'll have those conversations. And again, every school is very, very different, as we all know. And so everybody has different availability to funds. We get real creative with them on how to go ahead and solve that. But should it become an issue, we certainly would bring it back to both.
All right, Eric?
But there were some principals that were very ecstatic about them. I got a couple of free lunches, less than $25 a giftable, but I had a couple of principals take me out for lunch. They were so happy about it. So, as a fat man, I love lunch. So,
by and large, they're very excited about having the latitude to make decisions at their site that benefit their kids and our employees.
To the T, all of our principals care about our teachers and understand what problem this is trying to solve. And I think they understand that it's impacting them. But I think by and large, all of our principals put their staff and their teachers first, just like they do the children.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, I love it. I'm very excited. Thank you. And thank you, Eric, for kind of championing this. So I appreciate the work. Thank you. Now we are ahead of schedule. I just want to put that on the record. So next.
I just want to make a comment before you go forward on the agenda, is that normally we break the agenda into two pieces. It's kind of the before lunch and the after lunch. The items up to this point, staff has prepared presentations and been actively involved in. The agenda items that remain are board items that were brought forward by individual board members, and this is typically your after lunch discussion, which is typically amongst yourself with minimal staff support.
So are you out of here?
Yeah. We're here, but we have not prepared any presentations, but I'm here to take directive at your will.
All right, so 2019 board meeting calendar. Kathy had brought forward, rightfully so, some questions as we move into 2019. We, as at the organizational meeting, always adopt our calendar, which we will be doing again in November, but to kind of give staff a heads up on when our upcoming board meetings would be. You guys all have a copy, and there was just questions about, specifically, I think it was March for spring break, when we would have it. Was there any other? In December. So again, would we?
No, that wasn't the day I was going to talk about. No, but the day I was going to talk about was January 8th. Because you run an issue of, you have a meeting January 8th, and when you have questions, all the staff is gone. It makes January 8th meeting problematic if you have questions or issues with stuff, and there's no way to get a hold of anybody.
True, but so it's kind of a flip of back-to-back meetings.
Why don't we move it to Thursday?
Or we could do Thursday. I mean, there's no.
I'm fine with. I think that's a great solution.
Yeah. Boom. All right.
We don't get anything else out of order.
So January 10th would be the proposed. Okay. So
Yeah,
January
that's okay.
10th. Nice job, Jane. And then March, being that spring break, so we would normally meet on the 5th and 19th. But because of spring break, we could meet on the 5th and the 26th.
But then you come with the same
meeting. So,
you come with the same problem on the 26th.
Or we have one meeting during March. I always hesitate on the 12th. When we have one meeting, there's a lot sometimes to be on there. But
Yeah, but on the 19th, I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, if we move it to the 26th, I mean, a lot of the questions, I mean, because it gets posted on the 15th. I mean, we'll still have the ability to talk to them that week before spring break, wouldn't we? Or
Yeah, it's like we've done in the past for, what was it? I guess spring break. I mean, it's back to back. It's basically, we do almost 2 agendas in one setting. So,
Well, I mean, I think you're back to Eric's point, is it's the Tuesday after spring break. If you're going to try to double up in March, I would say the 5th and the 12th, or
Yeah.
5th and the 14th. If you're
Yeah.
going to try to get 2 meetings in.
So would I.
okay.
So do the 5th and the 14th, Thursday the
14th, and then 14th would be workshop day. Yeah, I think that works. Anyone?
Sounds
All right, do we need to move to, there's no April,
Extension, nothing goes.
so is tax day the 16th?
We're fine with the 16th.
No,
Actually, my staff was very happy that I was not there that day.
I have no
I
issue
don't-
with
I
doing
don't
it on the
know why.
18th. I mean,
But there was a big bill from Daiquiri Deck, which I'm still trying to understand how that came about.
so,
I'm serious.
well, would you like it to be moved on a Thursday for that particular month, that week?
Yeah, is that possible
Is
for us
anyone
to?
opposed to that?
I am.
yeah, I think we should try to keep them on the Tuesday. I mean,
Okay,
we're already
that's fine.
moving them around.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can see doing it because of break, but
All right. I'm not going to push it. I understand. I'll get another
You
Daiquiri
for
Deck bill.
And then moving to, unless there's any other issues,
July.
then just
I have one.
go ahead.
One on our holiday and observance calendar, the back of this one. We used to list Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and it's not that it's that we're off, but it's to give staff an opportunity to be aware that Yom Kippur is falling on that it's
Yeah.
September 18th this year, so that they know not to give homework, because some of our Jewish kids will not be in school. And I didn't do Rosh Hashanah because Yom Kippur is the one that's the holiest. It's like Good Friday.
Yeah.
So when is Good Friday next year?
We're out typically spring, I don't know.
What? It's Good Friday?
Yeah, when is Good Friday?
It's in here, guaranteed. I don't worry about it.
March.
22nd, I bet you.
it's not listed on the list of holidays, is what he's saying.
May I Google it?
Yeah, I have no problem with it, Ms. Brown.
Yeah,
but I don't have
April
a problem.
19th. It is, it's on here.
April 19th is Good Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're off, see? So I'm not asking for it off, but I'm just asking for an awareness that we put in the
I am
back
fine
of
with
this.
that. Is there any issue with that?
You're all wrong.
Wow.
When is Good Friday?
Friday, April 19th, 2019.
That's
I
what
said
she
that.
said. That's what they
Oh,
said.
you said March. Okay,
Nope.
then you're right.
Thank you.
sorry, I-
Question mark. I know what Good Friday is. That's exactly why I knew when she said Easter's April 21st.
So who should, well, I'll tell this to Kathy, right? Kathy will take care of it.
Why do we care about Easter Sunday if it's a Sunday anyway?
No, Good Friday.
Good Friday.
Friday's usually off, right?
Okay, so I think that
Yes.
for point of
That's
clarification,
right.
what Caroline's stating is that if you turn on the back of the page, it has recognition, holidays and observances. She's not saying that we would be off on April 19th. It happens to be Good Friday, and we happen to be off, which is oftentimes historically how its professional days have somehow been planned around that. I think her suggestion is not asking for it to be a day off, but similar to other listing it from an observance standpoint, and I have no problem with that.
That's what I want. We used to do it. I don't know why
Yeah,
they stopped.
so no issue there. Do you have any?
On that note, the calendar committee will be forming now that we're back. We typically will work on our 1920 school calendar. We kind of have a rhythm to it. We know what the days off are, but with the idea that we'll put a calendar together for the 1920 school year, and we like to have that published before year end. And so if you have comments as that committee gets underway.
I wasn't on the board when you last did it, but I assume it's going to be, it's an easy process, right? The calendar?
Not always.
No controversial?
He's being facetious, my goodness. Wait, before we go to that, did December, Kathy, I'm sorry, I know you don't have a mic, but was December a question on there? There's only one meeting.
One meeting,
So
the 11th.
the 11th, December 11th, my sister's birthday. Workshop board meeting, yeah.
We had talked about doing a retreat in either December
Yes.
or January.
Well, we can,
We initially talked about December, but then last meeting, people were talking about January. You You guys want to go ahead and pencil that in?
I would love to. But, I mean, it wouldn't be a hard, I mean, technically, I think the board in November could
I mean, personally,
amend it,
December,
but,
we only have one meeting, and
but yeah, I think,
I know, but that's,
I had,
say this, if we have new board members, to have a workshop in December is kind of soon for a new board member to absorb anything, to have any questions. January would be better. Just from a perspective, if we have new board members.
I don't have a new board member.
Well, that's what I'm planning on, but I'm
wait, so
also
let's just, so
a realist.
I think, I'm impartial. I know that I want to have it something that we have it every year, kind of in a ballpark, whether it be December or January. I mean, I just would be happy to see it be a consistent process regardless, so.
Yeah. That should be good.
Yeah, the week of the 14th, fine.
The week of the 14th.
Do it on Friday, the 18th?
That's fine.
Are you out of town, Dr. Bowden?
That's a 3-day weekend.
Because of,
But Monday, you're not going to make it a 4-day weekend, are you?
so we can put a tentative
so.
18th on there.
I think we're supposed to make it the 17th, I think.
I wrote weekend.
The board retreat. So I'm sorry, the 17th?
Yeah, I think we're supposed to make it the 17th.
Okay.
Why?
Because
We could do a 2-day retreat.
Yes,
I'm
17th
just
and
kidding.
18th.
We'll start baby steps.
they have a 4-day work, they have a long weekend, staff does.
The staff at the meeting?
No, staff at the school district. And if they want to,
Try to stay away from the Friday before a 3-day.
right, in case people want to,
Anything.
scoot out early or something,
We would never do that, Mr. Robbins.
No, of
Go
course not.
anywhere, so. Well, okay, so
We would like to go to Daiquiri Deck if you could leave.
January 17th, how about we have for board retreat? Okay,
Okay.
so then, I'm sorry, I cut off, what was the next question? We did that. Clear, Kathy, we tackled all the good, okay, and we have that. And then, there was any other questions? I feel like I interrupted someone for
No,
board retreat. Okay, anyone, any other
nope,
thoughts?
nope.
Check. Moving on to school board procedures. Yay! I know you guys are so excited about this.
Very, very, very.
I read through this. Isn't this document easy to read with all the strike-throughs? So I
just have,
tried to copy what we had and then put it in a Word document so we could strike all, so you guys could see what the old one was to the new one. And honestly, the only thing is, I'll just add that so you understand the background of it. I brought it forward because as I became chair, I have to approve certain things, and I want to make. I don't get authority to oversee and make decisions outside of the board collectively. I have to act what the board has made decisions upon. So it really started with some reimbursements or something like that.
they were driving me nuts.
But I take it seriously when my name is signed off on those, and so it was not clear. So that was the goal of just getting it clear, getting board consensus. I have in the beginning, which I saw was stricken, was it should be adopted by the board. It has to be adopted by the board. It has to. If we're gonna own this document, and whoever's there, and then if you have a new board, they can amend it and adopt it. But you can't make a decision and actually ask a chair, whoever sits in that seat, to act out the will of the board without a formal action. Is that a fair statement? I mean, just in a normal procedural standpoint. So it's not a big deal, but it has to be adopted because I don't want to hear, especially as it relates to reimbursements, I don't think it's fair to the chair to not have fair and very clear direction.
Do we normally adopt our procedures?
Procedures that are from the superintendent beyond? No, but
No.
this is board procedures. So how else would you recommend doing it?
You just look at it, and these are the
I
procedures.
think you're missing the point. That, well, we
No, I'm
could make it
not.
a formal policy. I mean, if you read statute, it actually cites that if you're going to go beyond what is listed in statute in your municipality, a county commission, or a school board, that reimbursement policies shall be adopted in rules. And there's a statute statute that states it, or you follow what's in statute. So rules is a policy. We have a process for policies where so that we could go to that stuff and say school board operating policy, and then that would be adopted. So that's.
I've been chair 4 or 5 times. I don't know. I've never.
It doesn't, just because it wasn't done that way, I would argue doesn't necessarily make it
No,
right.
that's true.
So I think it's just a cleaner way to operate, and that's all. That should be the easiest discussion.
I don't care.
On this
How's
particular.
that? I don't care.
Okay, thank you. So the other item,
Well, why then are we, the strike through means you're getting rid of it, right?
no, I said I don't think we should get rid of that.
No, well, who was proposing we get rid of it?
I don't know. That we don't adopt it formally.
Shall be adopted by a formal vote of the board.
don't know.
Was striked out.
I mean, I don't know why that was being struck through in the first place. I don't understand.
Okay,
All right.
so we'll keep that. Outside of, were there any other?
I have a question.
Yeah.
We have 2 places in here where we have individual members' budget allocation, and where's the other one? And the other one is other association dues, professional development, community events. I don't understand. Why do we need?
I don't either.
Why do we need 2?
Where are you at?
Page 2 and 3
Page 2 and page 3.
has individual.
Members' budget allocation. And then you go to the next page, and then association dues, professional development, community events is there, but it's up here
Yeah,
too.
I would think that's duplicative. I feel like the individual budget allocation is for each
Well,
member.
the association dues should be coming out of a separate line account. It should not be coming out of, maybe that's what it's doing. This is bringing it out of a separate line account, and this is taking it out of each school board members. I want to be really clear about.
Yeah, I think
this.
Shirley's point was that in our policy of 2.60, if I'm correct, I don't remember, and I think 2.5 is political activity. Is that right? Okay, so that it states that a budget allocation shall be provided for board members for association dues. I mean, it's as broad as that. So then the question is it a lump sum item within our board cost center? And that includes currently, right, if you read it, it says association dues, and that includes value adjustment board, typically FSBA, and to date, the Florida Coalition School Board members and the consortium. Those are the 4 that I think are through that budget line item, which is
Correct.
approximately, it's been 97,000 in the past now. It's probably because value adjustment increases, so 100,000, let's just say, give or take. Or you say that and then that's how it has been. And then moving to the monthly, and I'm not gonna, I mean, if that's how you guys wanna go, I'm just gonna leave it that way. I don't wanna make that an area of contention. My biggest thing I think has to be clearly identified here is travel and event reimbursement. And so in the past, it was something where it said $250 a month. I thought it made more sense to say, give each board member within a budget allocation, divide it by 5, and that's what your set amount is. And if you supersede it,
That's all we have.
no, we do not. No, we
That's
do not.
my understanding has always been that.
We don't have it. So
I've just been good without knowing it.
no, I just don't know if it's been I mean, doesn't matter. Moving forward, trying to make it.
Well, but on the travel, if you go back to policy 2.6, it talks about not only the membership, but related cost. And so if you're traveling to and from FSBA, that would come out of the allocation there, not individual board member accounts.
Oh, really?
Isn't that policy 2.50?
2.6.
I don't have the exact one, but
It's-
it's very,
it's
I just want to make sure.
2.50.
I'll share my interpretation there so that we're on
No,
the.
tell me again, please.
Policy requires a separate allocation for professional development and participation in associations. And it says in that policy, it talks about and related costs. And I interpret that to mean your participation in. And so if you are traveling to and from a staff development, that is a staff development line item, not your personal allocation.
Okay.
So if you look at our current budget right now, it says association dues, and then there's out-of-county travel and in-county, and that's it. There's 3. So currently, the way it's been utilized is the out-of-county travel, which would be incurred when anyone attends a professional development, whatever the association may be. That reimbursement would come out of the out-of-county travel. It doesn't come out of the association due line item. So if you're referencing a policy, it just says a budget item shall be allocated towards that. So it doesn't just dictate how it's listed in the budget. The question I think before us is, so all of the options being presented are in compliance with the current policy. A budget allocation is presented or provided for travel for association dues. That's how the policy reads. Yeah, Shirley.
I would like to just leave it as it was, maybe look at that $250 per month, but we have to understand, too, especially when you're talking about in-county travel, for somebody who lives closer to the landings, that in-county travel, unless they go south for a lot, I mean, the person living or persons living south that will be traveling north, I mean, their in-county travel may run over this 250. I mean, if anything, I might strike the 250 and say that there's this amount of travel.
That's what I was presenting. I don't
mean,
think
so
it should be within
the only
amounts.
thing I'd like to do is strike the 250, period, and everything else, just leave it as it is, except maybe you can say that it should be turned into the administrative assistant. I would strike monthly, but all in-county travel forms should be submitted to the administrative assistant. And if they have to have a reason for a purpose for going,
They have to.
We have forms.
We have to do that, and
that's already there. So I would, the only thing I would do is strike the monthly and leave everything else like it is, and that it, that the forms be turned into the administrative assistant and let it go, leave it as it is. I mean,
Let's go under the budget allocation may include, but is not limited to. Other professional duties, why don't we take out, why do we have other in there?
I don't know.
Other travel, I mean, why do we have those words in there?
Those were not. Those were the additional added-ons from the last meeting.
I say we just leave it as it was.
Okay.
And
Okay, so my biggest thing is I don't think the 250 a month needs to exist. I do think you want to have restrictions over within the budget amount. I mean, to be fair, what if Mrs. Goodwin and I you wanted to go somewhere and I wanted to go somewhere, and there are different times at the year, and I blow through our $15,000 allocation. That's not fair to you guys.
Hawaii.
Right, I mean, just who knows? Just bring. That's why it's about being fair and balanced. It's not about handicapping. You can't have.
$1,500 a person.
There's nothing that says that. I mean, that may be something that's why it's important to have it listed out, because it doesn't matter if it was how it was practiced. There is nothing listed out to follow, and
that's when we add the budget item. We add a budget item for on an annual basis.
This is making it more complicated than it needs to be. Eric.
I think there should be some budget constraint. You should have to. I've said this every single meeting. There should be some sort of constraint, but. Because Jane and I live in South County, I'm willing to give Jane my $250 a month, because I'm never going to put in a voucher so she's never going to go over it because she lives in South County. But I think there has to be some sort of upper limit on school board members' expenses. I've been consistent about it.
I think that's the case.
Teachers, no other employee in the district doesn't have some sort of constraining number of what they can spend. I mean, I'm sure if a teacher went to the principal and asking for stuff, I mean, the principal only has so much money to spend. No, you're shaking your head no?
There's no constraint.
There's no constraint?
There is, no, we don't say at the beginning of the year, each of any type of employee gets an allocation. We evaluate the requests as they come in.
But we don't have
say
anybody
every teacher,
evaluate.
Here's $1,000 for professional development and travel for a year. We say submit for that, and we evaluate the request on an individual basis as opportunity.
So who does that?
So who does
Board
that?
level.
But we don't have that.
Like, who does that at the board
So in order to have a self-checking process, there needs to be some sort of limit. That's what I was saying. Whatever that number is.
I have no opinion on how the board conducts themselves. You were drawing a comparison to how we do it on the staff side, and I was just clarifying.
Well, I was just saying, but there is some limiting factor, and that limiting factor is the review process. Correct. So there is some sort of limiting factor, and if you had a budget, your review process is, okay, I only have X amount of money I can spend, so therefore I have to prioritize. Do I want to go to Acapulco? Or do,
Well, that's why.
But you're
Or do you want- or do I
do
want-
not want to be in a
never go to-
position,
I understand.
nor does the board
California
chair,
or
to say you
Right.
can't go to
never do that
Acapulco, but I have no
Acapulco?
problem telling that to a
Okay.
principal or a teacher.
But my point is that if you had a budget and it was X, that's self-limiting. Then you have to say, do I want to go Acapulco, or do I want to go to a bunch of community events in Sarasota? So there is
Live Oak, that's where I'm going, Live
See?
Oak.
a Live Oak.
That's what I do to myself automatically.
Okay,
I
so-
never go to Las Vegas or any
Again,
of those places.
I don't. This is.
Yeah, 15.
I don't know why. I will tell you. I'm going to speak very candidly. I have no idea why this is this challenging of a topic. I think that as whoever sits as chair, I think it's beneficial to have a clear guidelines. This is not set in stone. Policy we can change all the time. I think it just that if you are going to act out the will of the board and approve things, there should be some basis for it. In the past, it was not written in a manner that made any sense, and it's caused problems. That's why I brought it forward. I do believe there should be some oversight of saying we have a budget allocation. If you want to do it, divide it by 5, and that's it. And every year a budget allocation comes through, and it could fluctuate for that. And then if there's a rare circumstance or whatever that a board member feels that it's valuable to bring forward, I can't imagine from knowing how I would operate, if someone would bring it forward and you justify your public purpose, it's beyond the budget allocation, just like you kind of use that, it would be approved. I think it's as simple as that. That's all.
I
Yeah.
think as long as the association dues are not included in that, I don't.
I
have a
haven't even
problem
talked
with it.
about association
No,
dues. I've
but
kinda
I'm
left that
just
alone.
I'm just making sure, because I don't want it to come back later and bite me. So I'd rather clarify.
I mean-
so as long as association dues are separate, and when we could, I'm fine with $1,500 a month. I mean, a year. I don't think we spend that much a person. No,
Shirley.
I don't even remember. I don't even turn in my mileage.
You know, individual board members have to justify why they go someplace. And we also have staff, before they write that check, verifying whether or not those are allowable expenses.
Right.
I don't want to be in the position where we have a person on the board, a board chair, then making that decision whether or not you can have that expense. I think that's putting too much on the chair. The chair shouldn't be in the position to be approving other people's travel. I think that should be going, it should follow the rules that are there, and that we have with, other staff having travel. And, it's not for the board to determine whether that person's travel is accurate or not. I mean, travel documents and reimbursement expenses are public records. And if there's a board member that is abusing that, I mean, I would hope that the voters would find out about it. But I don't know that we should put somebody in a position that they oversee and are looking over and making a determination on whether or not somebody's travel is valid or not. We've never had that before. I've never turned down or a member's travel. It's up to that member to make that decision, not the board chair.
Nor have I, and I don't think that's
have
the
I.
case.
So I would just like to take out all of that language on the member's budget allocation that's being added and say, nope, let's just leave it like it was. If we want to take out that.
$250. Get rid
I
of the
don't even
$250
see
a month.
$250.
It used to be there.
Yeah.
Struck
You
it.
can take out the $250, and you can take out,
Stricken.
that the and I think the travel should be submitted monthly or not monthly, whatever. But it should be, I think we
Which
should
is
just leave it like it is,
I don't
like
do
it was. And the board members on there's the next item that's got some changes on it on page 4 now. I think this language is fine.
Which one are you talking about?
Well,
Which
there's board members wishing to address a certain topic raised may do so.
Not the completion of all speakers. Okay.
And the chair can direct the superintendent to have appropriate staff. I think
Yeah.
when appropriate might be a little extra, but I don't care. And then I think notifying the administrative assistant. And, and if she wants to capitalize administrative assistant, I'll let Kathy go with that,
It is capitalized.
I'll let her go with that. And
board meeting
as
should
a
not be.
courtesy, that we should notify. And
I did not do,
Okay, I think I'm clear on it.
but about the board retreat that we should have one every 12 months, should we put that in the procedures? I mean,
yeah. Yeah,
And if later on the majority doesn't want it, they can get rid of it.
right.
We've been talking about it for like 3 years. All right, what? Other? No, we're just getting rid. No, those are just getting.
We're getting rid of that.
Yeah.
the
there's
only part we're getting
duplication.
rid of in that area is the 250.
I don't have 250 on mine. That's stricken.
Well, we're
It's
leaving
stricken
we're
already.
getting rid of all of the striking stuff except the striking the 250. All the rest of the stuff is going to stay as it is. Oh, so the
Just
250
other
won't be
people's
there.
Money. No, I'm kidding.
All that blue stuff is going
But
away.
Shirley makes a good point. It's public if you want to access it. It was really was meant to make it more balanced for whoever sits as the chair, but apparently old habits.
Well, I was told that we had a discussion about it, that it shouldn't be my determination on whether somebody's travel is. I think that was my first time as chair. That came up. That who are you to decide? I should be the one to decide. Is the way somebody.
Truthfully, I would
Phrased
ask
it.
Sheila when she was my administrative assistant, then I'd ask Zoe. I mean, they know what's coming through from everyone.
But can I please make a request that you include a public purpose statement with all of them? And I think that is in here, wherever my statement, wherever it is. They have to be included
I think
because
I have on my-
as chair, have seen ones and I don't want to, but you have to ensure, I mean, that it's if you're
Oh, I
doing a
wonder why.
reimbursement, I think, again, if that's just, it's important. You have to remember, this is not our bank accounts, other people's money, and that's important. That's a process that has to happen. Okay, I've done OPM. All right, I'm done with this. Moving, unless there's any more comments on board operating procedures.
No, I think we thrown most of it out.
I'm so glad I worked on that.
Not OP. Not OP.
Moving,
Nature.
stop, okay.
Cell phone.
Jane, yours is the next one. If I could find my agenda.
I'm going to snappy this up. First of all, I just want to refer you all to a site, Away for a Day. And I would hope that you would look that up and read through it and give us some thoughts on it. The superintendent and I have discussed this, but it's primarily a site that talks about middle schools don't need cell phones out during the day. I have a bigger issue, and Section 4 and 5 that will be reviewed by Dr. Kingsley and I, we've talked about this issue, so we'll be bringing it up for review. But before that, I have had some serious concern about what I've seen in our schools last year, and then I understand it's reoccurring this year. In some elementary schools, cell phones are out and engaged. I participated in a program last spring, and fifth graders had cell phones out all around a table, and I, kind of hit the roof about that with the principal. I understand that principal is still, using cell phones as a reward at lunchtime to do such and such. There's no reason that an elementary student needs to have a cell phone. But more importantly, this Away for a Day is a site that talks about no need for a cell phone in middle school, and how these kids need to be unhooked and unengaged. I know some parents are concerned that they need to talk to their children and connect with them several times a day. There is an office with messages and I'm sure a courier that could either go to the classroom or call the classroom and ask to speak to a child if there's a problem. But we have gotten way more engaged than our policy stipulates. And our policy stipulates the cell phone will be put away during testing. The cell phone will put away except when a teacher asks the student to engage with cell phones. But in most cases, in our middle schools, which I'm talking about heavily now, we have all kinds of smart devices that we use in our tech active classrooms that, really don't require the students to use their cell phones. So they are, checking things, talking to each other via text and so forth all throughout the day. And if you ever go into a school and see them between classes, you know what I'm talking about. And I think it's gotten out of hand. So I would just say, let's have a discussion about it when we get to those sections, but please review this away for a day and let me know what you think about it. I've had some parents who have spoken to me about this being what they consider to be a big concern. When polled, many parents, about 80% or better of parents, have said they think that kids should be unhooked up through middle school. So that's really what I wanted to present to you, is just to look through that, see what your thoughts are. I know that our policy is not being utilized and is not being enforced in these schools. So I think we need to make a decision and maybe change our policy or become more restrictive, which I would be an advocate for. Yes, Shirley.
Well, I would think that we would extend that to other personal devices, not just cell phones. I mean, because we don't want them having their game pads out. We don't want them having their iPads out or whatever else they call it. But all of those personal devices should be in that discussion.
I agree with you, and I think we need to have a thoughtful discussion. And if you happen to be visiting schools, ask a few questions about this, because I think that there are a lot of people who interpret our policy very differently than what I do.
Do we have a lot of, I believe, I'm not sure, and I know in certain circumstances, certain smart devices, iPhone, iPad, are utilized for curriculum purposes in the classroom. Is that correct? Certain
Yes,
times.
that's what I was waiting.
Well, but there's a specific exemption in the current policy
Right.
that says electronic devices may be in your possession, but they're supposed to be off, except for at the direction of a teacher in the part of an exercise or a lesson. And so there are activities at which, students Google. There are ways that you can poll classes using text functions and different things. And so some of our teachers do use the cell phones as a teaching tool, but that's covered in the policy. I think what Ms. Goodwin is talking about is class changes, lunchtime, non-academic pursuits.
Eric?
Yes, that's what I am talking
Yeah.
about, because I see them out, and as I say, when I see a fifth grader in the library or in the media center sitting there with their cell phone out, as this one is, I'm concerned.
And this
And
one.
Shirley's is out,
I
and
swear.
Todd's is out. Mine is not the only one that's out.
He was Googling a book
Mine's in
title.
my
He
bag.
wasn't using it at all. I
Hey.
was in the presentation.
Brown
Wasn't
this
using it at all. But I just think that, I think that we all know that there is an effect on the brain. We all know that students are not fully engaged in school when they're worrying about a cell phone. And I just think that we better be clear in whatever policy we adopt, because these children, when I go out at night and I see a family at dinner and nobody's talking to each
I
other,
agree.
it's really concerning. But the effect that has on the brain, it's a really good thing for youngsters' brains to be disengaged most of the day. It is a good thing, and hopefully our parents are limiting how much time that they spend. When I have grandchildren with me, it's the first thing is, give me your phone. And it's like, oh, no, I can't do that. Yes, you can. So I just think that we need to look at this site, Away for a Day, and it's specifically talking about middle school and about the brain of a middle school student. And just give me some thoughts when we get to October and we review that, because I think we need to be more explicit in our policy.
Eric?
Yeah, I know that we restrict social. I mean, I think if you see a middle school boy on the phone, he's probably not doing social or communicating with anybody, because they really don't communicate at all. I think you're probably going to see them playing Fortnite.
Exactly.
I don't know if Bobby does that, but the Fortnite. But my question is do we restrict their ability to get to the Fortnite server at the school? Because that's what, I mean, to 2 o'clock in the morning, they're playing Fortnite and.
What's that called?
That's why your son's data usage is high. He's not able to access a school server. They do it through their data. We don't jam data service.
Oh, we don't?
Our teachers have asked if it's
Geo-
possible.
Oh, so they could be sitting there playing Battleground or Fortnite.
Geofencing, right? Hey. Like Yik Yak or some.
So Fortnite, it's a game that you play with your friends and their squads, and so you're talking to your other friends while you're playing.
I want to call it the core.
Your grandson plays it?
Yep.
I was
It's the crack of the new millennium.
hoping I didn't need to actually come up, but being able to answer any questions. So certain applications do allow for geofencing. Yik Yak was one years ago that enabled that. Many applications over the years, we've communicated with the developers of those applications asking for geofencing capabilities at our schools. Some have been more receptive to that request than others. In terms of on our network and when connected to our Wi-Fi, yes, we do block Epic Games, except for our technical high school, which is part of their curriculum with the gaming program. But when they do jump on their own data plan, we do lose oversight as a school district, and then it becomes on the parent and how they've set up their own restrictions on their child's device as to what they can and cannot access.
Interesting.
No, I've done that. I've hired people. He figured out a way to get around to the passcode on the Apple. One area he excels at.
All day long with what
Is he
you're
looking for a
saying,
job?
Yeah, the one area he excels at is how to get around Apple
I just
restrictions.
think that, our students need to be fully engaged, and we talk about that all the time. And why doesn't that extend to a cell phone or a smart device or an iPad or whatever it
Disengaged
is?
there and engaged.
Because they are not fully engaged, in that realm if they are not paying attention. And I just see far too many kids moving around campus that, hopefully they don't fall and hurt themselves because they're engaged more with the phone than they are walking down the hallway. You don't agree?
No, I don't. Because I watched both Owen and Colin,
Thank you, Joe.
and they're constantly checking their phones, and it's never interfered with their learning. Again, I do agree with you that while they're in the classroom and there's learning taking place, they should not be on their phones. But if they're at lunchtime, I don't see any reason why they can't use their phones. I don't. I know I call them
In
every
middle
once in a
school.
while. Pardon
In
me?
middle school.
In middle school. I would text Owen or Colin if I needed something in middle school, and they wouldn't answer me until they were free. But they wouldn't do it during class.
I personally agree with. I don't know how it would be by way of a policy, and I'm familiar with ours reads. I think there's a difference of, because I also don't want to handicap teachers or principals, and I can only imagine my children aren't old enough yet, and I cringe for the day that I have to consider cell phone for them, and not until they're 13 or 15. I don't know. Anyway, but I do agree that to promote it and get rid of it, I mean, I think that's beneficial. I'd like